Yeah, I don't know if you got this, but Doug actually sent us a care package.
Those are US dollars, guys.
Hard cash.
Yeah, just remember how much onto that.
Hello, everyone. Everyone's sort of logging on now. We'll start in a minute while we all sip these wine. Oh, I don't know. I've become a Chardonnay and Pinot Noir kind of girl. That's all I do.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Oh. Becky, how's Aurelia today? Is it nice and sunny? Sunny, wet?
It's the Sunshine City. I don't know if anyone's told you, but that is its name. It's yeah, it was a nice day up here.
Sam and Emily are tuning in from sunny Nova Scotia, so that's exciting. We've got a whole new time zone.
I know.
Yeah.
I almost joined early.
I mean, it's better than joining late, and that's. I mean, if I've learned anything through pandemic, whenever a wine Zoom is being scheduled and there's different time zones, it's always going to go always.
You know, and it gets dark here at like 4 o'clock. It's like dark. it's nuts. It's just like it. You could go to bed so early here. It's bananas.
All right, well, I apologize for keeping you up, but
It's 8 p.m. here. I mean, we got Matlock and then it's bedtime. So let's wrap this up.
Before the TV channels shut down and it's just the Canadian flag waving.
Yeah, that's it. We're stuck watching the CBC late night news.
We have started watching the CBC regularly, though.
You have.
I have.
Jacob wants to know when you're moving back.
Oh. I know. I decided we could talk to Jake about that later. It's probably not happening for a while.
It's more like when are we doing a wine coach field trip to Halifax that's the real question.
Absolutely.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, welcome to Wine Coach. This is our last virtual wine coach till whenever, but thankfully some kind of crystal ball told me this was the perfect date to do the last one, and I'm super excited considering the whole city's opening up the last 2 days, and everyone's got 1,000 restaurants to go to, and the gym, and there's lots of popcorn. That popcorn ain't gonna eat itself. But tonight we're back on Zoom, and we're really excited to be here. We are it's kind of like we did session 1, we did Burgundy, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and this time we're back on some Pinot Noir and some Chardonnay, this time a bit more in the New World. I feel like New World is a little like, I don't know, I don't understand what that means, like New World, and I think we need, as a wine community, come up with better things than Old and New World, because I feel like it feels...
Or sing it.
It just feels like greasy, and I feel, yeah.
You're sitting around London, you're like, oh, there's the New World that we haven't seen yet, but it sounds lovely.
Wine from the colonies. So that's what we're going to be tasting today, wines from the colonies. Santa Barbara, California, kind of like my new favorite wine region. So I'm really excited to and I've been pouring these wines, wines from this region for a few months now, but I'm really excited to show it side by side to another wine region I love very dearly, the region I was born in, Victoria, from Australia. And I don't know, for some reason, both of these all of these wines have apart from having in common, my love for them, seem to have flavors and feelings in common, and wine styles that sort of are in sync with one another. So I thought, let's taste them side by side, because sometimes especially Australia, I need to taste more. I forget to taste Australian wines, and then I get really, really okay. Bruce, settle down. Speaking of greasy, But I can't do this alone. As always, there's literally 4 other people on the screen with me. So let me quickly introduce them. Doug Cooper, hello, how are you? You're representing Australia. Thanks for taking the bullet for the country and representing the motherland.
I should have worn my Attica shirt, I guess.
No.
I mean, and for the folks,
Sorry, what?
for the
Is that some local restaurant, Doug? I've never heard of it.
yeah, it's just a little diner, diner on the in backwater Melbourne. But you did live in Australia for a number of years. You tasted lots of Australian wine, and you love this region as much as anyone, I think.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first regions we really bonded over was when we met Greg Cora, who's a hilarious individual. And, even like, I remember, so when I worked at Attica in Australia, we were #1 in Australia at the time and top 50 in the world. But I was in the kitchen, so I was useless as far as wine. But the song was really great. It was Banjo, did you work with in Sydney? But he did lots of crazy stuff. So we did, all the pairings were magnums, and he tried to like really impart a great wine culture with us, and he got really excited and shared with the kitchen team, which was entirely unnecessary because I was 21 and not making a lot of money and didn't care about wine, just wanted to drink beer. But the labels always stuck with me because I remember like Bindi was really recognizable and by far, and things like that they would try to drill into us like this is really important. And then when I got to Toronto and I got involved with the wine community and kind of grew up in that world, I remember seeing the Bindi label at a random tasting with you, and I was like, why can't they sell this? Like we were fighting over it in Australia, and here it was unknown. And I was like, oh. And at the time I was at Jacobs, I just scooped a bunch of the stock because nobody knew what it was. And I think like as more and more people get to try the wines and see what's been going on there, what's kind of been mostly absorbed by the local community, you're starting to see like some really, really exceptional wines with kind of uncompromising quality.
All right, great. I'm excited we get to share them. And then on the other side of the Pacific, representing
I have to think about that.
representing Santa Barbara is one of the like unsung heroes of like Californian, like importing and bringing in some amazing Californian wines into Ontario. Megan sitting next to me, Megan Ridgway. Hello, how are you? Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
and Megan's also like, I think, and unfortunately for the people also on the call, Megan got the most like comments for the Sauvignon Blanc wine coach we did. And so many people came up to me and said, Megan's amazing. She was the best person you've had on yet. And unfortunately, all Sam, Emily, and Doug have been on before that. So sorry about that, everyone. But you've had a love affair for Santa Barbara for years now, and like I know you bring with your own wine agency, bringing a lot in. Are you excited to see sort of like how people's opinions and habits of Santa Barbara will change and like drink more? I hope. But
definitely, because I didn't start working with Santa Barbara wineries, but it was kind of like a natural progression, magnets down to that region. I was working mostly with Napa wineries when I started importing, but I feel like for the kind of first couple of years that Santa Barbara was being kind of reinvigorated up here, people were talking about the new wave of California. And I think now is the time that people are catching on that this new wave of California is actually really exceptional winemaking, and winemaking inspired by a handful of winemakers in and around Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, who have been there since the 70s and 80s. And it's a whole new generation of people coming up making extraordinary wine that, as we might see, can rival places even like Burgundy. So they're really, really cool wines coming out of there. It's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited to taste these wines. But I can't judge these wines alone. So I asked two dear friends, Sam Mallinson, Emily McLean, welcome. Thanks for coming in. And if you didn't catch on before, thanks for coming in all the way from Nova Scotia. I'm really excited that Toronto gets to see your smiling faces again. We're all excited.
Thanks for not forgetting about us the second we moved out of the city.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
It's nice to see you guys, and I was really delighted when we received these little pouches in the mail all the way out here.
I forgot about that.
Warmed the cockles of my heart a bit.
Yeah.
You're still our core group of friends, even though we live a flight away now.
I mean, we can just start splitting bottles and like shipping them across the province.
Selection can be a little bit dire here, but there's also like a bunch of stuff that sits on the shelves. So like I can just go and buy Donhoff off the shelves, or like there's, not that I want to spend the money on it, but there's like Saint-Péray from Auguste Clap just sitting around. If anyone wants white wine.
Hot fire. Flying up Saint-Péray. Who
Had it in your hand.
made that decision?
No, it's like, is it worth it? But I don't know, $100 for Marsanne, Roussanne, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought Bruce would chime in there for sure, but he didn't. So
well, I mean, we've been rambling on for like 15 minutes, so let's taste some wines. We're going to taste Chardonnay, but the 2 Chardonnays and then the 2 Pinot Noirs side by side. I don't know. We'll just chat about them, see what we get. Like I've putting my nose in them. I haven't tasted them. Like they have a really similar vein, so I'm excited to see what people think. Wine number 1 is an oldie but a goodie. Mac Forbes Chardonnay Yarra Valley 2019. I mean, we often, I feel like Yarra Valley is overlooked in a lot of ways when people think about Australian wine. And the minute you taste, or the minute you go to Yarra Valley, if you're ever down there, please, like if you're ever in Melbourne, absolutely take the time to go to Yarra Valley. But the minute you get to Yarra Valley, you meet some of these winemakers, you realize that they don't think like winemakers like in the Barossa or like Coonawarra and these big Margaret River, these big bold wine regions. They're all about like restraints, and like they live in a kind of like a different world than the rest of Australia. And it's really exciting because you kind of see that in the wine. But Dougie, what do you think of this wine? What makes you excited about this?
I think like the kind of vein for tonight, like the general kind of thesis is basically like international travelers heading to Burgundy and tasting with, Dujac in Irawara's case, and like Clendenen, I can't figure out who he actually tasted with. And then Sandy, obviously he tasted with everybody, but basically like going to Burgundy, falling in love with it, and then bringing it back home to try and replicate what they tasted there and how does that kind of work. And I think Australia's strong suit has always been that it's been a colony first, and then there's a major trading hub for Europe in that kind of part of the world. And so you've always had trade that kind of accelerated the winemaking region of the time. Like you have, Penfolds and like that. I think if you block off like Barossa Valley and Margaret River and like Shiraz is kind of one thing, and then you look at like Burgundian varieties as a different thing, because it's kind of its own more niche thing where Gary Farr, people kind of came back and said, we're gonna make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I'm really tired of drinking Grange. Like Grange is delicious, but it's a lot. So I think like when you kind of look at the realities of bringing, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay to the New World at the time, I think Australia was kind of set up well because you already had the cooperages sending wine here. You had the vine material was transported here with the colonies and with the people that were coming here. They would bring suitcases full of their vine material, which is nuts because it was probably on a boat at that time. But they set up shop and they had that trade started. And I think Mac Forbes is the new generation. Like this is the first generation of their wines, which is exciting because as that kind of Victoria hub grows and the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from that area continues to be more exciting and more marketable internationally, you start to see a real kind of growth in the area and a more like a deep dive into the soils that are already there. So, Yarra, I'm trying to remember how far Bindi is from there, but like the Macedon Ridges, that's like slightly west, right?
Yeah, it's like an hour. They're probably like an hour's drive from one another.
Yeah, and so you see like how much they've dug into their soil type, where you're finding like huge deposits of quartz and things that you don't see around the world, it really kind of creates unique wines that the more they dig into the terroir, the more they're pulling out of it, and the more exciting the wines they are. And but I think it's hard in this comparison because Sandy is unreal. But I think as far as the quality of this Chardonnay, it's really well made. You know, it's a bit reductive, but there's a lot of kind of unique terroir components to it. And it's not, when you talk about California, it's not Russian River, it's not Sonoma outside of the coast. Like it's kind of its own thing that showcases a really cool part of the world, both climate and like trend wise, that has a lot of complexity to it and can age for a good amount of time.
Good one. Anyone else? Anyone else got any thoughts?
Before we got into
I just on that note, I mean, for me, it is a little reductive, but it blows off pretty quickly. Like you get it in the glass and you start moving it around, and it becomes a bit more expressive. And I don't know, like we're all really, really far on the inside here, so it's hard for us to say. But like, I don't know, it's great to drink wines that are like really like bright and lively and refreshing and mouth-watering and yeah, I don't know.
12.5% alcohol. It's delightful. Like
yeah, I just, you know, it's so funny because I think still for a lot of people there's still that kind of stigma of like California wines or Australian wines, or they're all big bruising kind of like full on. You know, it was a bit like kind of like old money versus new money, right? Like people are like, oh yeah, we just have to do things like over the top, like whether it's actually stylish or not, or if it's like actually tastefully done. Like that's just like if Burgundy's delicious, like then what's Burgundy with riper fruit and more oak and I just love the restraint on these wines. And I think like, I mean, the fact that Nick, you're doing a wine coach on Santa Barbara versus Victoria is I mean, I don't know, that seems unthinkable 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It would be like a seafood competition. Crabs versus Moreton Bay or something, bugs or something. It would never have been wine. And if for people who aren't super familiar with like Yarra Valley wines, like I think you see more and more of them, especially at the LCBO and in wine shops. Every year, there's more options to try. But like, what I really like about this one, like Mac Forbes is like, he's not like super low into like super natural kind of low intervention, does absolutely nothing, but he's really close to that far end on the spectrum. And he like really like in the 90s, in the early 2000s, really championed like natural winemaking. But like in the glass, you're sort of not seeing that super like reflected to be like, it's not super skin contacty. It's, you know, it's not funky, it's not bready or like full of wild yeast, but it is still like really sustainable, organic, biodynamic wine practices.
I think he still does a light filtration. You know, it's under a screw cap. It's not, you know, covered in wax with some cartoon drawing on the label. Like it's pretty accessible wine. You know, it's not like caricature natural wine. That's for sure.
Like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also find in my experience, the wines of Yarra, all three, Chardonnay, Pinot, and Syrah have this really beautiful savory character. And it's so specific to Yarra Valley, particularly, maybe other places in Victoria, but I find it in whites and reds. And it's this beautiful mix of really savory, I don't know if you'd quite call it concentration, but then on the other side, they're light and luminous, and they're, you know, 12.5% alcohol. They're beautiful. It's such a good region. Tasty.
Yeah, and like if you want to like get behind Yarra Valley wines, like this is really a classic example. Like this is kind of what you'll get in a bottle of Chardonnay and glass Chardonnay from that region. Dougie, what were you gonna say?
I think you kind of land like so. I guess my kind of thought tonight is to compare these expressions to their old world counterparts, again to Burgundy. And I think if you got this in a Saint Aubin or something like along that line, you'd be pretty happy. Like you Verre-Lamy, like that kind of thread, I wouldn't see too much of a difference between these two. Like there is obviously differences, but like comparing it, it's not Kistler Chardonnay versus Laflave. Like it's kind of very consistent between the two. Kistler's
Yeah.
great. I think that, I'm just trying to.
No, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
different
like,
style.
I mean, to that point, like, does this wine see any new oak? Like, it probably goes into older barrels, but it's not. This wine's leesy and like slightly reductive and minerally and fresh, but I don't find it like overly oaky in any way. There's not really any of that kind of caramel, vanilla, butterscotch stuff. I mean,
No.
It, like you say, like if you're drinking something from the Côte Chalonnaise or something from like a really top producer.
Yeah,
Not a
yeah.
whole difference.
Yeah, for sure.
I need to slow down because I would drink that so quickly.
Yeah, no.
Trying to save some
I
of my
don't-
glass.
And like $50, I mean, it obviously it's still a lot of money, but like for what you're getting,
Yeah,
like
I agree.
I'm not mad at paying that much for like such a good bottle of wine. And like wines from Australia are notoriously expensive when you start to like not jump in like price point, but like in quality. When you start going to really good producers, you start having to sort of pay a little bit more, and it regardless of whether the bottle is worth, $50 or $500. You kind of, there's this weird jump between mass production wine and industrial wine that comes from Australia that's super cheap, and then premium wine that comes from Australia that isn't. But I don't think it's as clear as it is, so perhaps in California or in other regions of the world. I don't think most people don't sort of appreciate that sort of two very different industries of wine exist. Let's go to California. Wine number 2, everyone. Megan, tell me why you love drinking this wine, or why should everyone drink it?
So Sandhi is Rajpar. Rajpar is Sandhi. Raj is known for being one of the most famous somms in the world for sure. Someone who accesses some of the rarest wines in the world. So his experience with tasting, and as Doug goes back to internalizing benchmark wines like Burgundy, is unparalleled. And Raj moved down to Santa Barbara in the Central Coast years ago to try to explore the region. The interesting thing is he was inspired by Jim Clendenin, who is the late great winemaker of Au Bon Climat, which might be coming up. But Raj wanted to use, like Jim, use Burgundian techniques, particularly in California, to bring out flavors that California had barely started to see yet, or bring out quality that California had barely started to see yet. And I would probably argue that Raj is what started the new wave, or is a huge factor in person and figure in starting the new wave in California. So the Sandhi, I've had the Chardonnay a couple of times now. He's working in Santa Rita Hills. Santa Barbara there are various regions within Santa Barbara. Santa Rita Hills is particularly known for being very extreme vineyards. You stand on these vineyards in Santa Rita Hills, particularly the ones that he's working with. You can see out to the coast. They're incredibly windswept. They get good sunshine, and they're sitting on really complex rock formations under there that vines like. Raj follows the movement of IPOB, or in pursuit of balance. So everything that he does is in the vineyard. He picks at the perfect time, at the perfect ripeness, and he's picking for structure and acidity, which really is the structure that drives this wine. It's super racy. When I opened it for the first time, we were concerned. So we decanted it for a couple of hours, and it really comes out after that. But this is a somm wine. It's a nerd wine. It's a wine that has some reduction. It's just it's something that kind of sits on the very extreme of what kind of finesse can be accomplished in California. So there's not a lot of fruit. It's not dominant. We were all taught look for fruit in New World wines, and we are taught a certain structure to understand New World wines, and this just doesn't apply. I know that Raj, everything's done by hand. A lot of it is done by pigeage, so he'll foot stomp. He's using things like old basket presses to press grapes, and with the Chardonnay, it goes into neutral oak barrel and it just sits there. There's no lees stirring, which is part of what really promotes that reduction, that flinty struck match kind of quality. And it's all spontaneous fermentation. And he's really particular about no yeast being introduced to the cellar. So the fermentations are long and low, and they make really complex wines. It's tasty and delicious.
So delightful.
So good.
Doug, I'm going to ask you a question. I mean, you wanted to talk about like comparing this to like a Burgundian producer. Like where does your mind go when you taste this wine?
It would cost a lot of money. That's what I think of a Burgundy wine. Like you're looking at Premier Cru in the sweet spot for sure, without the risk of Primox. So I think I'd be very happy to buy this at $85 all day. It doesn't have the cachet, but I mean, you're running into Premier Cru, Chassagne, or Polony all day, and I don't know. I think this is an exceptional wine. I'd be very happy to get this and put it in my cellar any day.
Yeah, and
like,
sorry, go.
I guess like if you compare, like you have Dujac Foletier, and that's a different wine, but like, are you less disappointed? Are you more disappointed drinking this wine than that? Like, I don't think so. Like, I mean, as far as like fighting for an allocation and getting access to this wine, like, I think you should be very happy enjoying this bottle.
If you like Chardonnay, you're gonna love this one. I mean,
For sure.
I think
everyone would be happy to drink this one. Sam and Emily, what do you think? Feelings, thoughts?
I was just going to say, I think it's worth noting that there's actually some generosity to this wine, right? Like I think sometimes, I think the Sandy project is 2010 maybe was the first vintage, or somewhere around then. So I mean, it's a young project, but I mean, to me, there's still pleasure in this wine. Like some of those early kind of iterations of, like let's make cool climate California coastal stuff. They were just kind of like acidic without kind of depth and pleasure. It was just kind of like, as long as the alcohol and the acid are in the right place, we're happy. But like you would never compare those wines to Premier Cru Burgundy, right? Because they just didn't have the kind of depth and the richness and the complexity. And I mean, now we're talking about this wine as being something like Premier Cru Burgundy, and I think there's that learning thing that happens anywhere of okay, like if people are making 14.5, 15% alcohol super oaky Chardonnays, I want to do the exact opposite. But where's that kind of sweet spot where we can be restraint and show terroir and taste of place, but also in the end make what's truly just a great wine, and not a wine that's led purely by a dogmatic approach of acid over everything, including pleasure and deliciousness.
And when you go on the Sandy website, actually, balance is the word that comes up on the screen. Everything is about balance, and it's a mixture of making the style of wines that you love, but also respecting the vintage that you have and the grapes that you have and how they're coming in and when you can actually pick. There are really practical decisions that go into those, especially in California when things can get hot like that. So, these talking to Raj, we get into the Pinot Noir. I'm sure Jim Clendenin would have said the exact same thing. Everyone was on the whole cluster train for a while, and Raj kind of hates that now, even though he was the one who championed that style, and he still does. One of the things that he always says is the biggest, the biggest challenge that a lot of these new or old winemakers pose to themselves in California, making something like Pinot Noir, is themselves, because they want to do 100% whole cluster, and they have to do 100% whole cluster. And sometimes when your acid and sugars are perfect in the grapes, the stems aren't quite lignified. Or sometimes when you're waiting for the stems to get there, the grapes become, they start falling off, the acid starts breaking apart. So it's also reading the room. And that, that's pivotal. And I agree with Sam. I think that's something that, like any young region, you kind of have to go through the growing pains and learn and figure out and find what works best and just get comfortable. And it's part of that is simply just the number of harvests under your belt in that new little region down there.
Yeah. And
I think that there's a translation that kind of occurs when you go to Taste of Lafon or like a crazy place, and then you come back to California, like, hey, I'm gonna make Lafon here. And then you're like, oh, well, how much new oak is on this? And they're like, oh, we only have we have 50% new oak. But the thing that doesn't translate is that there's only 2 barrels. So they had to buy a new barrel because the old one was leaky. So now it's 50%. The other one, I don't know, it's got to do 6 passes. And they're like, oh, well, I guess it's 50% new oak because we had to buy a new barrel. And then they go to California, and it's like 50% new oak on everything because that's what they do at Lafon. It's like, well, they only made 2 barrels of that. So yeah, I think it's kind of that translation that's more important.
Meanwhile, all the other barrels they have are 2nd-year-old or 3rd-year-old, right? They're not 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th pass. But I don't know. I find it amazing with both of these wines because Mac Forbes is a young project too, right? Like
2004.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're talking like less than 20 years for both of these producers, and they've already kind of found a pretty good expression, or maybe a great expression of the grape variety and the place that they're growing. And it's delicious on a world scale, but it's not, it's not like even other California wines or other Australian wines, let alone Burgundy or whatever else. It's really cool. Like, I can't imagine to know what places like the Yarra Valley or Geelong or Santa Barbara is going to look like in another 20 years.
Yeah. It's really
some of it will be underwater.
Yeah, it's interesting to go in between the 2 wines if you still have. I forgot how full you fill these pouches, Nick. So I still have some. But it is incredible to go in between the 2 wines now. If I didn't still have wine number 1, I find number 2 quite expressive as in comparison, but I think it's because I have the luxury of having both in front of me at the same time. Mac Forbes certainly did, he did accomplish that restrained style of Chardonnay. I mean, we were talking about him before we jumped on this call, and it was he went to the Douro Valley to work with Newport, I'm quite sure, to be here's another area in the world that makes wine that has no issue getting tons of fruit. How do we make things more restrained? How do we dial things back? And I think he's done an incredible job. But the Sandy wines also quite restrained for the area.
We're a bunch of Psalms, so we keep shouting out Raj, but give Sashi a shout out because
I'm sorry.
Norman.
Sashi is Raj's partner in Sandy in Domaine de la Côte. They do a couple other smaller projects together, and Sashi is the one who's guiding. And it definitely, I think the genius of all of the wines that they make are their brains together, because Sashi knows how to bring out what Raj is looking for. And I think as they've gone along, Raj has learned endless amounts from Sashi about how to do that himself. So Raj now has this new project up in San Luis Obispo in Cambria, extremely cold. It's hit by the fog most of the day. It's a really, really interesting project. And I think Raj is taking on a lot of that himself because of Sashi. And Sashi is, as far as I know, very happy to be kind of the partner in the background. They're a really beautiful balance. And Sashi, he guides everything. And I think they started working together because they both had they valued the same philosophies in wine, which is total balance, beginning with structure, which is not overdoing anything, which is making practical decisions, like having to add in new oak every year, and also farming as holistically and sustainably as possible, which is really important because the health of the grapes is where it all starts. And they wanted to make the new best wine in Santa Barbara, and I definitely think they accomplished that. So yeah, Sashi Mormon, phenomenal winemaker, and the muscle behind all of these wines.
What did everybody think in the chat?
Yeah. After the first two wines, any clear favorites for people? We'd love to hear. And before we move on to the reds, the other thing I kind of, upon like thinking about these two winemakers, they kind of like both really championed these regions. So like, and it wasn't like they really brought Santa Barbara in Raj's case and Yarra Valley in Max Forbes' case, like to the up to the conversation that the rest of us had with we talk about wine, and like both of them used are trying to create wine that suits their region, and also both traveled a lot and like learned a lot from other winemakers around the world and different wine styles that came from. And I think that sort of shows in the wine their intelligence and their shrewdness to say, let's create something that we know, and we're the only people who can make delightful, like the best wine in this region, and because we understand it, and it's so delightful. I'm really excited that, like, I don't know, I don't often think about Raj Parr and Mac Forbes in the same sentence, but now we're in the same mind, but now I do. Whew, so delightful. Okay. Oh yeah, everyone. I don't know. I think Sandy's got it. The popular vote. At the end of the day, democracy doesn't matter. It's what Sandy.
That's right, Doug. We'll do a little gerrymandering, and it's all gonna work out.
I voted for Sandy too. So.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Sandy, not what I expected from California Chardonnay. That's like music to my ears.
Yeah.
That just makes my soul happy.
That's literally Meg's like
My whole
raison
mission.
d'etre is like surprising people with California, and like trust me, as someone who just refused to like taste, drink, sell Napa, like this has been the last year has been such a nice experience for me to like find a region in California that I can like get behind and like really get really excited by. And it pays off. Like people love the wine, and the winemakers in love, especially from Santa Barbara, are excited that you're excited. So
And surprised, there's a lot of them. There's so much good wine down there.
oh,
Yeah.
so
Do
much
we,
good wine.
do we address the Napa in the room, or what do you
So
think?
what's the Napa in the room?
Well, it's just like, when everyone got introduced to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the New World, it was Russian River Valley, like that kind of idea. And this, I think Santa Barbara is like such a big departure from where it all started, right? Like, I think, Peter Michael and things like that, everyone kind of got accustomed to this is a very different conversation than where kind of California Pinot Noir and Chardonnay started. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's just, to me, this is what's so exciting about it is it used to be, if you were talking about California, you were talking about Napa, or if you were talking about Australia, you were talking about Barossa, or at least Southeast Australia. Now, if we're talking about Santa Barbara, we're kind of like, well, where are you? Are you in Santa Rita Hills and making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, or are you just 30 minutes inland making Syrah at 14.5%, or you know, like big heavy wines? Same in the Yara a little bit, right? If you're down south, you might be making sparkling wines or Chardonnay Pinot. You start to go up the valley where you've got a little bit less coastal influence, and now you're making Syrah again, or maybe Cabernet or Merlot. And it's like, I find it so exciting because like, not only are we just talking about Yarra Valley now, but like we're starting to get to the place where you're like, well, where in Yarra are you, right? Like, or where in Santa Barbara are you? Are you like, oh, you're in Santa Rita Hills, but are you in like the really western part, or like what's your elevation? And I think like we talk that way when we talk about Barolo or we talk about Burgundy, you know, but we're getting to this place and it's just happening so quick. Like I was saying before, like both of these, the white wines we tasted, those wineries are less than 20 years old. I just get so excited thinking about like what Santa Barbara looks like in 20, 25 years, what Yarra looks like in 20, 25 years, because I feel like in the last 10, you know, we went from you know, like listening to a gramophone to getting iPods. Like it's like really like jump. So
Yeah.
It seems to have avoided the billionaire complex where in Napa you have like they'll jump in and build some massive estate and it's like, oh yeah, we make cab, I think. But then you have Santa Barbara where it's like, you know, it's kind of more, it still has that more rugged feel to it. Like Clendenin, when he was there searching for limestone in those early days, like it was nothing there. And so it's still a long recovery. Like you don't have the pressures of real estate prices that you do in Napa or Sonoma. You have more ability to have organic growth and like real complexity of viticulture without the pressures of a golf course or a mansion jumping in. Like it's kind of nice that way.
yeah.
And
For
there's
sure.
still nothing. Like, to be clear, it's I mean, for us locals, it's like comparing Niagara on the Lake to the county, but on steroids. Napa is, you know, Napa's filled up and Sonoma is so vast. There are so many, I mean, Sonoma it's actually quite mind-blowing how big that region is. A lot of that is the proximity to Napa. There's a very strong case that some of the best wine is also coming from the extreme west Sonoma coast. And that region with Santa Barbara kind of developed around the same time, these extreme regions where people who really get wines with structure and particularly longevity, that's where they're looking, because those climates just mimic the cooler climates that these other fine European wines come from. But Santa Barbara is rugged, and it's also, you know, way down the coast. It took, I don't know, it probably seemed like a shorter amount of time, but it's probably a 6-hour drive south to get from the bottom of Napa to San Luis Obispo in the top of Santa Barbara County. So it's all the way down the coast, and prices are just lower there. There's more room to play. It's you know, Jim was down there looking for limestone in the 70s and 80s really. He was working with people like Richard Sanford and Michael Benedict, who are Sanford and Benedict, who had done that searching and had planted one of the most historic vineyards down there. But, you know, through all of Jim's struggles, one of the best things that he did was continue to build ABC until his death this past spring. ABC, when you go to the winery, it sits on Biennacido Vineyard, which is massive. It's minutes to drive. You have no idea where you are. You would never see it from the road. You see the whole vineyard from the road. You never see where the wineries are. So you drive in. ABC is this patchwork of very, you know, basic structures put together and pieced together because Jim became basically the co-op where, you know, there's a young winemaker who wants to make their own wine and experiment. Jim would hire them on. He would work for Jim, and then at the same time, he'd bring his little row of barrels in and he'd be able to make his own wine there. And then another one came in and women came in and lots of young female winemakers came in and joined that troupe, and it just kind of kept expanding. So Santa Barbara is, and I don't know Australia, but it's such a great place for cooperation and working together, and all the new generation of these winemakers, including Raj, share equipment because that's the affordable thing to do, and it's the, you know, sustainable thing to do, and the economically viable thing to do. So there's also, I think, Santa Barbara and how fast it has come up is also because of the community and how much they rally together. Whereas, you know, in Napa, you definitely have strong community, but it's different because there's just so many millions of dollars floating around.
They're like,
It's very different.
Where do you buy your diamonds from? That's kind of the community. What's your favorite diamond merchants?
Are we talking shit about Niagara on the Lake? No, and Napa still makes phenomenal wines. Niagara on the Lake makes phenomenal wines. There's just
Jacob.
Toronto
Oh, is
is
that-
less affordable than Hamilton. Niagara on the Lake is
That's
less
what-
affordable than Prince Edward County.
That's what
For
NLTL
now.
means. I thought all the good wines came from Jordan Bench. I didn't realize they still made wine down there. That was just peaches.
Yeah. What are you
What?
doing? What are you doing, Doug?
There's a good question
about
about Los Gatos. That you run into Ridge, right? Like that's Santa Cruz Mountains versus Central Coast. I think you like, I don't know, Meg, you know better, but like Monterey to Santa Barbara kind of thing, or what do you think?
Central Coast still goes up that far. So you're in your Los Gatos and Santa Cruz Mountains, you're just south of San Jose. It goes up that far. Central Coast actually goes up. It almost starts getting up toward, God, watch me be wrong, but it goes all the way up almost to up below San Francisco and just inland. It has to do with miles to the coast and coastal influence in, but it goes quite high. Santa Cruz Mountains, I mean, Mount Eden up there, I was talking with the winemaker when I was down there this summer, and he was one of the people who in the Santa Cruz Mountains made some of the most monumental Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir. And I think at the time then, and even now, how many wineries do you see making Cab Sauv and Pinot Noir? And probably unanimously by everyone would be called one of the best producers in California.
right.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Should we drink some more wine?
Yes.
Wine number 3, everyone. We're on to Pinot Noir. Perennial favorite of mine. This is the last of the wine, unfortunately. I
We'll
thought,
get
you know
some
what,
more.
let's get rid of this wine. Illawarra, my boy Nick Farr, from Geelong. I'll put it up in the chat. I mean, Nick Farr was awarded like best winemaker in Australia in 2020, which, you know, isn't a good year for everyone, but for him, he had a great year. But yeah, we'll see his wines like start to creep up in price, but I don't know. When you talk about this wine, it's just so delightful, and I love showing people like red wine from Australia that isn't Shiraz, and people are so surprised by that. Like, I mean, Chardonnay, you can kind of imagine, I mean, you can't imagine really any part of the world that doesn't grow Chardonnay. You're not surprising anyone by pouring a Chardonnay. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I tried, I could find a Chardonnay from the Mosel Valley. Like if I really tried.
Probably doing it.
Yeah, but when when I pour Pinot Noir from like Australia, people are like shocked that that's what the wines that they get. They think maybe New Zealand for like the home of, you know, Southern Hemisphere Pinot Noir, but these wines are super captivating. And, you know, we're at like, this is about just over $100 a bottle, but like, this is a sort of a higher end, but the winemaking philosophy, I think, shared by this and Jim Clement, all of these winemakers that we're tasting tonight are pretty much similar. They're pretty switched on, pretty smart, seen a lot of like made wine in a lot of places and came home to like champion regions that people never thought of or never wanted to think of. Dougie, tell me about this wine.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of like we're talking about the next generations and moving forward. I think this is a good example of that. Like this is Nick Farr taking over for Gary Farr. And so the other advantage of Australia over Santa Barbara is that it's the southern hemisphere. So they get 2 harvests a year. So they do their own harvest, which is, I guess, coming up soon. And then they shoot over to Burgundy and do one there too. So they work twice as hard as the California producers, which I think is great. And then both Gary and Nick have always worked at Dujac, which is, I think, one of the best Burgundy producers and funniest people I've ever met. And so they spend, there's always someone from the Farr team at Dujac for every harvest. And I think when you look at like Dujac has his own style, is very, very recognizable within Burgundy. And I think this translates really well. Like, so the other thing to note, it's not on your note, but this is 2016, which is also 6 months ahead because the harvest is different. So this has developed a bit. But this doesn't scream like New World Pinot Noir to me. It resonates much more of Burgundy to me. That's my own personal take on it. But I think you get kind of like really talented winemakers imparting it onto the next generation. And Nick actually worked at Au Bon Climat as well. So then he came back, and now he's doing his own project there. And like we had dinner with him when he came to town, and just the amount of evolution and the amount of touch. Like now, he's not trying to source the right cooperage from France. He already has that connection. He already knows how to get. He doesn't need. When you look at a By Far bottle, it's very similar to a Dujac bottle. So they've already like that kind of ugly work is already done. And now it's like, do we use new oak on our? We talked about like new oak versus our young vines or our old vines, or do we? There's a much more finesse and much more touch. And like Illawarra is that expansion from the original kind of Geelong property. They moved towards whatever that's called near the Royal Mail Hotel, and they've kind of explored new terroir. And I think it's Nick's kind of expansion, Far Rising, and like all the kind of the way forward for the winery, but still having that root of all your kind of logistics are covered. You know which exporters you're working with. You know where you're sourcing everything from, and you have a general idea of what you want to see in the vineyard. And then you kind of have your own touch. And then I think that's what we're seeing. And I think this is a good example of a second generation for a new wine region.
Really delightful.
So good.
I love this wine. And this wine, or some of his wines, the By Far wines, mostly we see it in classics through the LCBO. So, if you signed up if you get the vintages email, keep an eye out. Every now and again, these wines turn up. And when they do, you're paying probably $80 plus, but like, you definitely get it in the glass. I feel like these wines are a little high end, but like not overpriced and not like screaming, rich white people sort of energy. It definitely has someone who's like trying to like do something special. And the fact that Nick Farr and his father Gary are like for so long underappreciated, and like only now being considered some of the greatest winemakers Australia has ever seen. I grew up in the town that these people like Gary and Nick grew wine up in, and no one ever talked about these wines. No one ever served these wines. And obviously I was young and it was a different time, but it literally wasn't until like coming to Canada where people like, I sort of understood when you start tasting Burgundy and you start tasting some really fancy wines, you're like, oh, I understand. This one makes complete sense to me. It isn't just 15% Shiraz. They were trying something new, and it's taken them a long time to be appreciated for it. But
Champion by
We'll have one of the largest Dujac allocations of any private client as well.
yeah, if you're actually in Australia and you go to Brisbane, Nick Farr helps out a wine bar in Brisbane. I think it's called the Loon, and he sells them at, he gets a lot of Dujac for them, and it's probably the only wine bar in the Southern Hemisphere that has that much Dujac in it for how casual and cool it is. But for those who know, Dujac is one of my favorite Burgundy producers. He's been on the show. You know, it's classic.
Maybe that's why New Zealand gets like 6 bottles.
Yeah, probably. He just stopped. Nick Farr had some kind of embargo that he stops everything coming in. Sam and Emily, what do you think of this one? I mean, I feel like you've had this before. I've forced you to drink it numerous times. I'm pretty bad like that.
I mean, every time I drink it, it's a fucking struggle. You just keep forcing us to drink it.
Not at all forcing us, but I don't know about you, Sam, but Nick is definitely you're the person who introduced me to the By Far wines, and I had the opportunity to taste with Nick when he was in town, and I couldn't make it to the
Talk
dinner.
about
But that feels like forever ago.
Long.
I know, but I was just blown away by him and the wines, and I'm delighted just that they're getting recognition and that they're being championed as they should be.
I think what you meant to say was that it was a Geelong time ago.
That's definitely not what I meant to say, but thanks.
100% appreciation for that.
Yeah.
Sam, Geelong is the headquarters for Billabong as well.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. We'll go get some Bordies and then drink a bunch of good Pinot Noir.
Good, great, perfect.
I mean, I have, absolutely. You know, and then it's funny because we joke about this, but I poured this wine for Australians who think they like drinking wine, and they're like, I don't like this, which is a shame. But you know, I think that's a curse of every region, that sometimes the people who are least appreciative of the people who are, you know, are just down the road, that just do not, they're like, no, I don't want to drink this wine. Which is, I mean, we see it in Ontario. I mean, see it in Austria a bunch as well, but it's a shame. But, you know, they continue to push through, and they continue to make fantastic wine regardless. And I'm so excited. I always forget. I have a few bottles of this in my own cellar, and I'm very excited to drink them. But my number 4, let's go back to California. And I don't think we mentioned this before, but Santa Barbara is it's like an hour outside, north of LA. It is pretty close. Kind of, yeah. Very similar to how the Yarra Valley is, you know, an hour and a bit outside of Melbourne. There's something, I don't know whether that's something that also influences it, you know, having a huge metropolitan center. I mean, LA's country unto its own, but you know, that you can be a bit more experimental because there is a larger, there's a bigger breadth of wine drinkers in these cities that can sustain making a skin contact, you know, Gruner Veltliner, or, you know, some kind of weird, you know, white Nero de Avila, I don't know,
That sounds like Australia.
I think one thing that they did in Santa Barbara that was really smart, because you can drive to Santa Barbara and they'll be like, great, I want to go see wineries. Oh, that's going to take me 45 minutes, an hour and a half to get there from Santa Barbara. I thought it was already here. Was how they just started having tasting rooms pop up in the horribly named Funk Zone, I think it's called, in Santa Barbara. But it's an old industrial area around the railroad. And it's nice because if you're only in Santa Barbara for a day or two, you might only be able to get out to a winery or two, but you go down to the Funk Zone, or even actually in downtown Santa Barbara, there's tasting rooms, and you can sit there and you can taste, you know, from 20 or 30 different producers, just kind of going on a little pub crawl, almost going from one tasting room / bottle shop to the next. And I think that's really smart to make it that accessible, right? Because if you were trying to pop around between Santa Rita Hills and maybe Happy Canyon, you're doing a bunch of driving, right? So it's not as kind of condensed and compact as some wine regions are, like Napa, where, you know, it's 30 minutes kind of to get anywhere. So I think it's a great idea to make it super accessible. And now if you pop up from LA or San Diego for the weekend, you can taste 20 or 25 different wineries wines instead of 2 or 3.
Town of Santa Barbara is really cute too. Cute, beautiful. And I mean, okay, so we get to Au Bon Climat Pinot Noir. This is Sideways incarnate. The movie Sideways, Paul Giamatti and co, Sandra Oh. Sideways made it. It also broke Merlot at the same time. But it made it. And Santa Barbara Pinot Noir, ABC was one of the wines. You could see the labels when they're eating at the restaurant. Drake Whitcraft's father founded Whitcraft Winery, and one of his bottles was the one that the waiter, I don't know who it was, the server or the sommelier presented to Paul Giamatti and Sandra Oh and co in the movie. But this is what gave rise to the craze of Pinot Noir, and this was definitely what actually put them on the map. It's crazy to say that it was a movie, but it was. And
It's Hollywood, baby.
it's Hollywood. You go to ABC and they have a massive Sideways poster up on the wall of their winery because they totally get it. And Jim loved that.
I was hoping you were going to say a mural of Paul Giamatti, but that's a second.
I wanted
I mean-
like a Jim Clendenin selfie with Sandra Oh, was what I was really hoping for.
I
It
think-
might exist.
I think the amazing thing to reiterate Megan's point here is that like after Sideways came out, people were going to Napa and being like, where's Au Bon Climat? Where can I visit this winery? And you're like,
That
like this like
makes me so happy to hear that.
the North Coast isn't the only place that makes wine, you know. But it is funny, like, you know, people are going up there and trying to find these Pinot Noirs, and you're like, dude, you're in the wrong part of the state. You got to go to
Drive it for a day south along the Pacific
Actually,
Highway or whatever
Take
it's called.
take the Big Sur route right on the coast, and you get down there at midnight tonight, and then you can make it by the morning.
There's zero chance they said that. They're like, oh, come try this. This is the same thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
That is exactly what happened.
It's Mount Veeder Cab, but you won't know the difference.
exactly.
It sounds like those Niagara on the Lake wineries down there.
yeah. Okay, but tell us about this wine because this is delightful, and I drink this every day. This is probably my favorite wine of 2021 was this one.
Yeah, so I mean,
This is such shenanigans. You guys are sitting on the same couch, and now you're saying it's your favorite wine of
Don't
2021.
worry, Doug. We're the judge. We're the judges. You don't need to worry about those. Like, I mean, there's a clear breach, clear rules infraction going on.
Doug,
So-
you should have flew to Halifax today. Could have all been sitting here together. Didn't know that Meg were going to be hanging out.
that could be waving instead of the cat in the background over there. You get your-
Yeah.
Yeah. So ABC Pinot. Jim had a really, I mean, the track with Sideways coming out in 2004. Prior to that, he'd been making wine for by that point, more than 15, close to 20 years. He founded ABC in the early 1990s after booping around in the 80s and doing a lot of Burgundy harvests. The Pinot that he makes, again, notable that they're on Bienesito vineyard. So this is just his baseline Pinot. A lot of it is Bienesito vineyard fruit. He just declassifies the barrels that he doesn't want to go into the single vineyard programs that really are the backbone of ABC. And this kind of, Jim's pursuit of balance defined the style in this part of California now, and arguably outside of that. He believed that he could make wine that was expressive and nuanced, and most importantly, long-lived and ageable, way before people were thinking about that in California. He continued throughout his entire career to go back to Burgundy and really attributes it to that. And also they at ABC, they stop for lunch around noon, and lunch consists of like a massive harvest table, multiple courses, multiple bottles of crazy wines on the table, and they all go back to work and back on the forklifts and back to whatever they're doing around the winery after that. But being there this past summer, everything was about how does it work with food and how does it interact with food and how does it go?
Yeah,
They're
good
old
point.
school. As much as they wanted to experiment in California and see what was possible, they were so old school where it was every question. When you taste a wine for the first time, you stop the conversation at the table with 20 people around and you talk about the complexity of not the complexity, you talk about the qualities of the wine, what you would pair it with, how it works with the food in front of you. That is so integral to the way that they approach wine, which is I think you just don't hear that every day about ABC, but really, really, really essentially important to them. If Jim hadn't been a winemaker, he would have been a chef.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what a lot of great winemakers say and feel.
Yeah, it's sometimes I think as wine people, as somms, as cleared by this conversation, how caught up we get on the nerdiest parts of wine, but the beauty of why we can do this and have a lot of fun is because wine and food, and we have to eat every day, and nothing pairs better with food than a glass of wine in front of you. So that's the reality of our profession is literally hangs on that one thread that, if people didn't want to have something with their meal, we wouldn't have jobs. So, it's important. It's really great that, that a winemaker's remembering that, because, we sometimes forget.
Totally. And in terms of
Unless you're Italian, they just understand it.
In terms of the wine structurally, he definitely plays with whole cluster. Doug talks about Dujac. Take that and transplant a lot of what Jeremy is doing in Santa Barbara, and that's Raj. So things like whole cluster fermentation, things like barrel fermentation without stirring the lees, the yeast that fermented the wine and then transpired, it ends on the bottom of the barrel. When you don't stir it up, you're creating those little bit of kind of reductive aromas. A lot of that is in white wine, but he also, he was a very confident winemaker in that he would leave gross lees in his breads as well. He tried to handle the wine as little as possible through the process, and that left behind things that added more complexity and flavor. And that's this Pinot. It's stemmy, and it's meant to be a drinkable, approachable Pinot, and just start to introduce you to the overall style of Au Bon Climat, which is in pursuit of balance. And Raj was the godfather of winemaking down there to people like Sashi and Raj, and to people like Mikey Giuni with Scar of the Sea wines, and a host of other people, other wines that are just starting to come in. You have Ojai on your shelves right now, another one, or the Davlay wines. There's a number, pretty much anyone you can name who are around our age, were taught something by Jim, and probably made their wines in the back of Jim's cellar at some point in time, which is always nice.
Yeah. I think, it's unfortunate that, he died earlier last year, but and that coinciding with the first time we've really saw these back in the city, these wines back in the city. But I think I hope it opens the floodgates to making these wines accessible, because that's, again, sometimes one of the faults of California as well as Australia, is that some of the great wines they just went with pricey, as opposed to fighting for allowing everyone to drink their wines rather than just like the people who can afford them. And, you know, all of these winemakers are really like passionate about making people drink, you know, allowing people to drink their wines. And I think, you know, as much as it can be said, like people like Jeremy at Dujac are like this, it's a really important philosophy for them to have these wines seen and drunk and enjoyed and not just like live in a cellar somewhere. And Dougie, what do you think of this wine?
I think it's really interesting. Like when you compare it to the Irawara like really rings true to Burgundy. Like it's Burgundy, but it's not Burgundy. Like it's a very clear homage to that kind of training and like how the family has grown up intertwined with the Sace family. This tastes like California, and there's no direct comparison in my mind to Burgundy. It's its own thing, and I think that's really cool. Like I think this is kind of like Santa Barbara Pinot Noir, and it's not over the top. It's not hard to drink. It's very enjoyable, and you know that's 40 years of work, right? Like that's how you get there. And like he has constant references to the old world and what makes Pinot Noir and Burgundy so great, but like he's kind of carved out his own thing here, and there's California sunshine all day throughout this bottle. Like it's really cool to see. It's, you know, like Irawara has its own thing, but I think the Burgundy influence is very prevalent, whereas here it's a lot more sunshine and happiness than what you'll ever see in Burgundy.
Sam and Emily, what have you thought about these wines?
I mean, I love this ABC a lot. I love it a lot just because like it's a wine I could pour for my mom and she would be like, wow, that's delicious. And it's a wine I could pour for my geeky wine friends and they'd be like, oh wow, that's super cool and awesome. And like for me, I love wines like that. You know what I mean? Like not every like thoughtful, well-crafted like wine that tastes of a place has to be challenging and weird. And like Doug said, like wine tastes like California. It doesn't taste like you know, Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. It maybe tastes, you know, well, it tastes like Santa Barbara. It tastes like something that's a bit more restrained. But rather than to try and kind of shoehorn this into tasting like Burgundy and harvesting it underripe or you know, maybe upping up the oak usage because they were trying to make it taste like Premier Cru or whatever. It's just really delicious, thoughtfully made wine. And as fun as it is to talk about, it's more fun to drink. So
100%.
Yeah.
We drank this in Dallas, right? Or was it the Chardonnay?
I don't know, man. I have terrible memories.
We're a couple bottles.
I
Definitely a Chardonnay.
years of, was it the Chardonnay?
You were
I think there were a couple.
Oh, that's why I don't remember because I wasn't there. But
To be clear, there were like 25.
I mean, I've done a lot of drinking, so
Sam,
my
why going?
You already had
There
a
were
pin by
so
then.
many of us there.
I was about to mute our mic before I told Sam, I'm like, that's their Dallas trip, Sam. You weren't on that one.
Oh no, he was there in spirit.
People I love.
Okay, what do we think? Sam and Emily, thoughts? Can you make a decision? Can you say tonight one of your friends triumphed over the other friends?
I
Which
mean,
one is removed
No, I'm
from
kidding.
the-
Look, for me, as much as look,
Nick, I'm quite
No,
sure
go.
you invited me knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do that. So
I knew that absolutely. That you were incapable of making
give
that
me a
decision.
couple moments to say everything I
You
love
get a
about
gold
it.
star, and you get a gold star.
Oh, okay. We didn't talk about this, but
They didn't ask me. You go ahead. I'll happily
No,
send
it's fine.
a petition your way.
I'm not putting you on the spot to make you feel bad. No, like, okay, let's say everyone in the audience, like, tell me what you thought, who you thought won, the wine that was your favorite. Emily, did you have a favorite wine, like the wine you just enjoyed drinking the most, regardless of anything?
I'm gonna go ahead and say the Sandy Chardonnay was like shining tonight. Like, and I absolutely love Chardonnay. I went into it being very excited about the wines tonight, but that one was just singing for me. But ABC, gosh, we're so lucky to have it. Well, I can't say on our market anymore, on the Ontario market. Yeah. So it's always just such a treat. I guess it shows what kind of like where I'm veering toward and who's winning. Doug, I adore you. You're one of my best friends. But
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No, Sambo, what did you think?
Well, I just wanted to let Doug know that I'm moving from Halifax to Aurelia. You know what? I'm actually just like super delighted to taste 4 wines from New World regions that sometimes get, lumped into the same category of being too ripe, too full, too oaky, not nuanced, whatever, and getting 4 super delicious wines that I would happily drink if anyone poured me a glass.
yeah.
I do think the California wines probably just outshined the Australian wines today.
Yeah.
But Doug, I also think outshined Megan. So
Jesus.
Fair. You know what? I'll take it. It's totally fine.
No, I agree. As much as I am, I mean, literally an Australian at heart, the California was the wines that I was just so happy drinking them, and I wish I had a whole bottle in front of me that wasn't empty in this case. But I kind of agree. I think California won. It was very close, and I think perhaps if it was like not in the middle of winter, I think perhaps that could also like have changed my opinion as well. I think there's something about of the Australian ones that just like are refreshing in a way that like you want when the weather's a little warmer and you just want to like I think we would enjoy the Mac Forbes more in warmer weather than we would the Sandy. But Doug, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously you're on Team Australia, but I'm curious as to like your impressions after this tasting.
I think like obviously coming off my tenure at my former employer, like I've watched so many like private clients and collectors like throw themselves in front of a car to try and get a bottle of Dujac Palais Montrachet, Foletier, like Dujac Post Antony. Like there's this huge idea that you have to like do whatever it takes to get a bottle of Grand Cru Burgundy, and then your life will be that much better when you drink wine. Like I think if you drink that Sandy next to most white Burgundy, you'd be very happy with that, and you don't have to deal with the crap. It's readily accessible. It's I think that's kind of the take home for me is that that Irawara, like that drinks like most really good red Burgundy. It drinks better than most Burgundy because there's a lot of stuff that falls off a cliff. Or like I think like kind of the idea of these winemakers that are now expressing what they fell in love with the Burgundy to us, like I don't think it's really lost. I think that they've gone back to where they're from. They've put in the time. They've done the work. They've imported barrels from France. They've done everything that's necessary. They've brought the winemakers over. They sent their winemakers there. They've done the work to really make fantastic wines. And I think they've kind of succeeded. Like, we're talking about digging deeper into Yarra. We're talking about digging deeper into, Santa Barbara. And like, that wouldn't have happened unless they fell in love with the wines that we've fallen in love with. And I think as the next generation moving forward, we don't need to keep driving a car into a wall to try and get an allocation of Burgundy. We can enjoy the fruits of the labor.
That is not how I get Burgundy, but
I honestly though, I think
you're gonna have to start battling over their New World allocations or colonies allocations. I really love
amazing point too, because we're all Psalms. We're all very fortunate to have had the opportunity to taste some pretty expensive wines that are not always accessible to everyone. Certainly not me on a regular basis. And I think if you're in the chat and you're sitting there and saying like, oh, like I don't know, all of these wines tasted riper than Burgundy. It might have to do with the fact that like if you're drinking base Bourgogne, a lot of the time those wines are a little underripe and a little bit, lean. But if you're drinking like really good Premier Cru Burgundy and you see the kind of ripeness level that they can get and you can see the oak use that they get, I mean, when we're talking about comparing those wines to these New World wines, I mean, it's an amazing thing because you're not sitting there and saying, oh, this is too ripe or this is too oaky. You're saying, holy shit, this is $60 and this would cost me 130 if I was in Burgundy.
Megan, how you feel? You happy you won? Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, California always shines. No, but I honestly, after going through these wines and tasting them side by side, I feel the exact same way. It's so cool. And when was the last time we did like a New World Pinot and Chardonnay tasting? But having lived in New Zealand and working with wines in New Zealand and on the floor in New Zealand, the fact that Victoria Pinot and Chard are being brought to the table is really exciting because the amount of wines of this quality, of just as good quality, higher quality, comparable, better, price points, we haven't even tapped into that yet. So I'm actually, as much as I love Santa Barbara, and that will always be my little place of happiness, there's so much that we haven't even touched yet in these cooler regions in Australia. And it's the same thing. And
Tasmania
is just so far away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Geelong, most people still haven't heard of. And correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but these Yarrawara wines they're even like further towards the west, right?
Yeah, Warrnambool, Colac, that kind of region. I mean, it's only like, I would say maybe half an hour's drive outside of Geelong, but going west. But like, that's a whole other wine, like region that is clearly capable of making some fantastic wines that I can guarantee you have zero to none wineries out there. So it's really interesting to see, like, this is a very random vineyard in a really strange place that doesn't have a lot of vineyards. And I'm curious to see, like, hope other people catch on and like start making wines from here.
Well, and people like Nick Farr bringing so much attention to such high quality Pinot and Chard that is possible especially in this area, in this part of Australia. In Australia, a lot of people up here how would they know? But in Australia, there is more and more emphasis on whether wineries are bottling, calling it Syrah or Shiraz. And it's a whole conversation and it's a whole different spectrum. And I feel like so much of that is because of the establishment of these cool climate varieties that are thriving and being brought out in the best light by people like Nick. It's cool.
But thanks everyone for coming. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope everyone can go and enjoy some more wine. Doesn't have to be from Santa Barbara, Australia. But Doug, Sam, Emily, Megan, thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Peter Pantry's open tomorrow, back for indoor dining. We've got a big bunch of Burgundy to drink by the glass.
Awesome.
So please come and drink it. Otherwise, I feel really bad. No, I'm kidding. And then we've got some we've got a bunch of wine coaches happening in person upstairs in our private dining, in our private event space this month. So if you're interested, check out our Instagram, check out our website. All the details are there, but there's some really fun tastings coming up. And I don't know, thanks everyone for hanging out. I mean, it's cold, it's winter, but I always enjoy tasting wines with some cool people, audience included. But everyone have a good night. Dougie, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening in Aurelia. Sam and Emily, thanks for tuning in from all the way over there. I'm so excited that I got to chat to you both.
It's the funnest thing we've done in 2 months. Thank you very much.
Oh, and Megan, obviously, thanks for hanging out and coming next. We live literally down the road from each other, so this was the perfect opportunity to
I
hang
miss
out.
them.
But yeah, if you ever, please come visit. And if you're in the neighborhood, pop by Peter Pantry, because sometimes you find these people literally just chatting to me, and they would love to meet you.
Best wine shop in the city, unless I have friends who also have bottle shops who are also in the city.
You do. You definitely have those people in
Chris
here.
is
I love Chris.
But everyone have a lovely night. I'll see everyone soon. Enjoy the wines. I don't know. I'm out. I'm gonna let everyone go because I feel like people are crazy. Bye.
Bye. Good night.